My name is Sandy Carter. I'm IBM's General Manager for Ecosystems, Entrepreneurship, and a Social Business Evangelist located in lovely Somers, New York. Developing ecosystems, I work with partners, entrepreneurs, app developers, universities all over the world to help educate them on things like cloud, mobile, big data, analytics, and, of course, social. So of all of those, I probably work the longest on the social side. So I'm also a social evangelist, which means I personally go around and mentor and discuss the value that social can bring to businesses around the world. Well, social has lots of values to businesses. In particular, it can help reduce cost by leveraging social to exchange ideas, to collaborate, to share knowledge. It can increase revenue by assisting sales teams and marketing teams to become much more effective. It can also increase customer sat by enabling you to engage and involve your clients in coming up with new product innovations, commenting on service, and essentially being part of your brand advocate army. So many, many benefits to the overall social value that a company can see. One interesting one occurred many, many moons ago when I was in college. I went to college. I was dead set on being a doctor. Had been since I was a small child and thought that's the only career that I could possibly do. And every decision that I made in my life was around that. In the summer of high school, I volunteered for free at hospitals, was a candy striper, learned as much as I could about everything. And actually found out that when I was dissecting some of the animals, I happened to be allergic to part of the way that they anesthetize animals and people, which obviously doesn't make for a very great doctor. And so I felt like I was at a crossroads in my life, which was here I spent my entire life at that time towards a single goal, and then realized that for a very good reason, I couldn't proceed down that path, and how would I branch into another path? And so I really learned from that things like having backup plans to make sure that you're looking at the full picture, not one picture of a decision. It actually turned out really well because my advisor was head of the computer science department, and when he saw I was so crushed by not being a doctor, he asked me to come and do a thesis in my freshman year about how you could do animal testing on a computer, and that's when I fell in love with computers. So the other part of that to me was just keeping your mind open, because what you think is going to be, and we'll talk a little bit about it, change is occurring so much faster today. If you get your heart set on something and you're not willing to change and readjust, life is going to be really hard as a leader. So I learned a lot from that decision, which occurred really early on in my career. The first one is change, and I talked a little bit about that in the personal decision, how you have to be ready to adapt to change. But if you look at it, change has really sped up since the quote-unquote olden days. I did a little research, and it says, change is anywhere between 10 to 15 times faster than it was 5 years ago. And going forward, they even anticipate that will grow greater. Things will change, they'll come, they'll go, and they'll disappear. Social is all about change. Things like Snapchat, where you post something, but then it's gone. There's no record of it, and you've got to change and adapt to what's going on. I think that change is a big challenge for leaders. I think leaders come in, and I think they get started going down a direction or a path, and I think it's difficult for any leader to then change on purpose, not to change casually or because they're forced to change, but to change on purpose. Yesterday I was reading some of the material by Mark Cuban, who, as you know, was on Shark Tank, and I thought it was really interesting. He said the first thing he does when he gets a new business is he comes in and he sees what does he have to change immediately that the current management didn't see, and then he's constantly every year challenging the management team to change before someone else has to change you. So I think change is one of the big ones. I think the second big one facing leaders today is that today we face more of an integration of ideas versus singularity of idea. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you go back several years, the internet was hot. and everybody had to get on the internet, had to get a website, and it was pretty singular focus, right? You're focusing on the internet, you're focused on becoming an e-business. But if you think about today, focusing on a single thing isn't good enough. Just looking at that technology comparison to before, where you're the internet or not. Today, it's I got to be in the cloud. I've got to do analytics. Like I got to have big data. I've got to be social. This whole, what we call CAMS, cloud, analytics, mobile, social area. You got to do all of them. And from IBM's recent research, we found that those companies who do all of them and integrate them into their business, they perform higher. So we're seeing to be more competitive. You can't just singularly focus on an idea. You must integrate those ideas, those technologies together to really be successful and competitive in the marketplace. And then the final one, which I think is a challenge today that's unlike any other, is this, motivation of the workforce. And I'm sure you're sitting there going, well, Sandy, we've been talking about that for years. But I think the challenge today is that there's a mixture of folks in the workforce, and you have to master this multiple motivation factors. And let me tell you what I'm talking about. So I see the workforce as, you've got millennials, you've got non-millennials, you've got digital natives, you've got digital immigrants, you've got those who aren't digital at all. And those different people in the workforce today, there's greater diversity of that than we've ever seen before. And each of those groups will work differently. They'll be motivated differently by different things. And I think in the past, the workforce was more homogeneous. So you could have everybody marching towards a single goal and really motivate with a single style, single message. But today you cannot do that. It's almost as if you've got to motivate on 3 or 4 different levels. So this is one of the things I struggle with today, is the multiple types of motivation you have to do, because breathing life back into your workforce and having them be motivated and people being the most important thing, how do you do that with a combination but different motivation techniques, to me, again, is one of the big challenges. So those would be my big 3: change, integration of ideas, and this motivation when there's a mixture of different types of people who need to be motivated in a different way moving forward. One might be boldness, bold enough to anticipate change and bold enough to change when you don't actually have to, bold enough to motivate in different ways, bold enough to integrate things that maybe don't seem to go together. I think the other may be cheerleader. I think today a lot of people want to change the world. They want to make a difference, and a lot of that difference making comes from completely disrupting industry, disrupting what's been there today. So you almost have to be not just a change agent, but a cheerleader to motivate people to be bold enough to accept what you're going to go through. And then I also think, I don't know how you call this, but simplicity master. So I think today there's so much going on out there, so much information, so many social tools, so much change, that he or she that can also master as a leader simplicity of message to the team, simplicity of what you're trying to accomplish, I think is also a great skill, especially with the complexity in the world today. And I think one of those is to listen. It's very simple, but I do think it is to listen. And I think a lot of leaders are used to being the ones that have to come up with the idea, the big thought, the big idea, and then rally everybody around it. Whereas in reality, I think now leaders need to discover the big thought. I think those big thoughts exist within their employee base. And I think by really leveraging and mining what their employees have to say, they can really come up with those, big thoughts, if you would. So I think that's one. And employees want to be part of the solution. And again, I go back to that, different types of people in the workforce today. Truly, we have in the workforce today some people who say, just tell me what to do and I'm going to go do it. Or like, don't tell me. I want to be part of it. I want to craft it. I want to use social tools, and I want to give input, and I want to see my input used. So I think you got this dichotomy in the workforce, and you see it at any social deployment at any company. Almost every company I've seen, about 50 to 60% of the workforce participate in collaboration, participate in giving ideas to management, participate in the future of the company. But the rest say, kind of leave me alone. Just, you guys go figure it out. Tell me the future. Tell me the direction, and then I'll follow. Don't bother me with asking my ideas. That's why you're in management. That's why you're a leader. Well, I believe that social will be embedded in every process build that we have in the future. So I do believe it will become, project management won't be done without being social project management. I believe that sales will all be social selling. I believe that supply chain will be done, with social communities where you'll solicit ideas from the suppliers and vendors together in a social setting, not like we do today, one off. So I do believe that social will be embedded in everything we do. I think part of the problem today with social is that employees in particular feel like they don't have time to breathe at work. They're all working so hard. And many people, as you said, kind of bolted social on, and they added it. They didn't take away something else. So they still have to do email and social. They still are doing instant messaging and social. They're still doing, presentations and blogs and commenting in a wiki. So in essence, right now, a lot of employees feel like social has doubled their work, where in reality, if you do it right, you don't bolt on, but you replace, you actually can reduce work, make work much more effective, much more efficient. I think it's 5 years away. I mean, we're seeing even today with our social software, IBM Connections, we're seeing so many people embed that into what they're doing, embed it into shopping and the way shopping decisions are being made, embedded into customer support, embedding it into the way they do sales. I think those are probably what I'd call the leaders. I think the laggards probably have 5 years to catch up, and I do believe, like many people have written, if they don't catch up, they will be extinct, and several years after that, because I do think that this community and asking for advice will become not a competitive advantage, but a table stake item as we move forward. I think a big leadership lesson is focus on people first. And you see this happening, you gave the example of Zappos. Zappos does this really well. Focusing on people and their happiness and their inclusion, engagement with the company. And I think that is a huge lesson. I think today you can get by with kind of doing 50-50, really focused on the business first and then the stockholder and then the employee. But I think here over the next year or so with the war on talent, you won't be able to do that. And you're going to need to create equality that your employees have inside of your business. So I think that's a big one. And I think that is a foreign thing to many leaders who grew up with a command and control type of style and attitude. I think the second, big one, and we talked about it a little bit, is this change and the speed and the rate and pace. I hear a lot of people just talk about how the rate and pace is so fast. It's almost like I was reading Alice in Wonderland to my kids the other night, and in there Alice said, I have to run so fast just to stay in place, not to get ahead, but just to stay in place. And I thought, this is how the world is today. Before I could run really fast and I could get ahead. Now I just have to run fast to stay in place. And I think that being able to adapt to change, read, learn, consume, devour, I think that attitude and that DNA inside of a leader has to be one of, changes and is something I enjoy and something that I push for, not something that I push away from.
Au revoir.